everybody, and thank you to Cup of Awesomism podcast. Grab a cup of coffee. And as always, thank you, Zelina Hall, for the opening music. I love having her music on my podcast because she's an autistic adult who's a country recording artist. So it's a great way to celebrate autism too with her. So my guest today is Don, and he is an autism dad. And I have to say, I follow him on Twitter, and he's amazing. I love the stories you share of your family. One of the things I love best about what you do is that you talk about it from every perspective, and I love that you include your other children in it as well as your wife. And I love how much love you show her for being a full-time caregiver. I think that's so important. And so often we tend to forget the full-time caregivers, and we forget parents that also like you, I know that you went through COVID, which was a very scary situation. And for you to have to put yourself away from your family and worry about that with your child and everything else. I mean, my son is high functioning, but even so, literally every day we do you have a stomach ache? Does your head hurt? Do your ears hurt? Does your nose hurt? Can you smell this? Do you taste what I'm giving you? And he's always like, yes, yes, yes. And I'm like, but he burst an eardrum one time, never told me, just said one day, my ear hurts a little bit. We go to have his hearing test, and I find out he had burst an eardrum. So I'm taking no chances with COVID. He gets really tired of smelling peppermint because I make him smell peppermint every day. But if he can't smell it, I'm going to panic.
Yeah, that's the world we're in.
Yes, yes. So why don't you tell us about yourself and about what you do and everything, and then we'll get into some topics.
All right. So my name's Don. I'm an autism dad. My wife and I have 3 children, Megan, Evan, and Ethan. Megan has Williams syndrome, which is like Down syndrome, but it's not. It's also a spontaneous genetic mutation that is not hereditary. It just happens. Somebody wins the lottery when they buy lottery tickets. We won that particular lottery. Our typical son is our middle one, Evan, and he's a 3rd-year medical student. Currently in his general surgery rotation, and he will bring home all sorts of interesting stories. He's out east for medical school right now, and in medical school they do rotations that last 5 to 7 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And he will have a break shortly, and hopefully we will get a chance to see him, depending on how the pandemic numbers look. Our 3rd child, our youngest, is Ethan, and he has a lot of autism, is the way we put it. A lot of autism means he's on the low end of the spectrum, the lowest of low ends that you can go to. He's nonverbal. He is the hand flapping kind who craves sensory input. He lacks just about all communication. He doesn't like to wear clothes or anything that you would find that would be a social norm. So at our house in the neighborhood, we're known as the Swedish house. We're not Swedish, but clothing is optional. He's 23 years old. And when I say he's around naked, they think, oh, he's walking around in shorts or something. I say, no, I mean, he is buck naked. There is not a stitch of clothing on him. And he wanders around the house that way. So we like to say, if you come to our house, you will learn the difference between boys and girls.
He's so sweet, though.
So we have we live in a cul-de-sac, and we have neighbors that also have a daughter with severe autism. She's also on the low end of the spectrum. She has echolalia communication. So there's some people will call that Yoda talk. You have to be able to decipher what she's saying to you, but you can pick up on what she's trying to communicate. For our son, there's very little cues. We don't know often what he needs or what he wants. We sometimes have to take a guess. As parents, we can pick up on some intuition and know what's up. There are some signs, like if he grabs me by the hand and pulls me to the door, or brings me his shorts, I know that means he wants to go for a ride in the van, which he finds very calming. So we'll I know he knows he can't go outside the door without having his shorts on. So we'll clothe them and take them out for a drive. So by day, I'm a dad. I'm sorry, by day and night, I'm a dad. By day, I'm a lawyer. My law practice focuses mostly on the financial industry that's regulated, which would mean brokerage firms and people of that nature that work in the financial industry that may have run afoul of regulations or want to comply with regulations, and that's where I come in. I also volunteer quite a bit of my time because of our family situation with a place called Pacer Center. Pacer is a parent center made up of parents of children with disabilities. Our group is national in its focus. There are parent centers in all 50 states. We consider ourselves the epicenter of all the parent centers because we, for a long time, held a contract with the Department of Education that we would receive new information about changes in educational laws, and we disseminate it to the parent centers. And then we would host every year a gathering. That contract has now been divvied up in a different way over the last couple of years. But we continue to be at the forefront for issues of affecting children with disabilities and their families.
Wow, that's amazing. That's awesome.
So as part of that work, I end up at the legislature as a volunteer to go and give some insight to our elected officials about issues that affect families with children with disabilities, and hopefully to give them recommendations on what to do correctly, and then to speak up when we think they've got an ill-advised public policy decision to make.
I think that's fantastic because, you know, I was in politics for 25 plus years. I was a grassroots expert. And, you know, I used to, you know, people would come to me and they would complain, you know, you guys didn't pay attention to this or that. And I try to say to them all the time, with all due respect, we can't pay attention to every single issue out there. So if you bring it to me, I would run it to the elected officials. I still do, you know, even though I'm out of it, I still do. And I think it's just my opinion, but I feel that the autism world, disabilities in general, but the autism world is not heard enough. We are kicking that can down the road, and we need to make that can now, not 20 years from now, which is kind of what I have decided. I kind of, you know, I started my podcast and I was bringing on friends and family, and I was just kind of doing it to kind of get my feet wet into it. And I wanted to focus on something that I really felt made a difference. And, you know, when I was growing up, my dad used to have this thing where, like, if I'd go and complain to him, he would just sit there and not say anything. And I would get so frustrated with him. I'd be like, why are you just not saying anything? Why are you ignoring me? And he'd say, because I don't hear a single solution. I just hear you complaining. So I'm just sitting here and I'm going to listen. Now, if you want to bring me solutions, even though they may be silly, we've got a starting point. And, you know, I, of course, being a typical teenager, would stomp out of the room, slam the door, and then come back with 25 solutions. And we would decipher through them and find a solution to what was bothering me. And I thought, you know, that's what I want to do with autism. I want to bring on people who are finding solutions, who are helping find solutions. Because the number one thing that I hear as an activist from parents is, who's going to take care of my child when I'm gone? And I'm lucky enough that I have 3 older children, you know, but I have a child, my 3rd child has Marfan's, and he was diagnosed with it at 18 years old because I'd never even heard of it until he was diagnosed with it. And how we found out is his lung collapsed and he ended up in ICU. And they said, we think he has Marfan's. And I was like, what? What is that? Well, that is genetic. And I'm Dutch. My grandparents were immigrants. And it's very common in the Dutch ethnicity, apparently. So, you know, there's a lot of things that we deal with as autism parents, and I want to help parents not kick that can down the road. And I've watched your tweets for a long time. I've read things that you've, you know, talked about and looked at, and I thought, I want him on here. What a perfect first guest, because this isn't somebody who is taking every day and using it as either seeking attention or just talking about what's wrong. You're out there trying to make such a difference. I can't thank you enough as a fellow autism parent for everything that you're doing. You do so much. And I love the stories. I love your pictures in the van. Those are my favorite. Him in the back seat and you're taking the selfies. And you just see the expression on his face that he's happy to be in that van. I love that so much. And I love your little comments like we have clothes on and things like that. They just make me laugh. They make me smile because your love for your son and your respect and love for your wife is so beautiful. And I love how you show that. And I love how you like talk about your other children and you're so proud of the things that they're doing, like your daughter being in the wedding. It was beautiful. I love these things. I love the way you share things. So that's why I asked you, would you please be on my podcast? Because I thought I want him on there. I can't like your stuff enough on Twitter. So I thought this is my way of showing you how much I really like what you're doing. And I love what you stand for. I mean, I like that you're an advocate. You're an advocate and an activist. And that to me is so important.
Yeah, so I use that Twitter with a pseudonym for it's at Autism Wisdom. And I started that several years ago, not really with a really good reason to do that, but I put the more raw stuff out there. Facebook, I've always used just for somebody told me it's like your fake life. You put out there only the bragging stuff. And it's hard to go on there and brag too much about your son or shorts outside for the first time in a while without people wondering what in the world what kind of world am I living in that I would brag about that. And the Autism Wisdom was a good place to put out the more raw information. And then when we were going through some more tougher self-injury periods, I'd put some of that out there as well because my connections then were with other autism parents who also knew what I was talking about. And it was a little bit of camaraderie that people were able to acknowledge that we all are in this as well, because raising a child with autism can be isolating. It's hard to go find another family that is living the same experiences. And because of the nature of their behaviors, it's hard to get together with other parents of autism, just because it's hard to, when, for example, our neighbors that have a severely autistic daughter, it's hard for them to bring her to our house or us to bring our son to their house, because we'll still have those same behaviors going on that you're on constant attention, trying to make sure that they're not doing something that's dangerous to themselves or others. So I started doing that. Now my neighbor is also an artist and we're working on a book together. And I had committed to him that once I got to 3,000 followers, we'd have the book done. Well, I've exceeded that threshold and I still don't have the book done, but he's waiting on my draft and I promise it is going to get done this year. That is so beautiful. It's in the process, and it is it's going to be a illustrated guidebook from two cool dads about raising children with autism.
I love this. This is so great. That's the other thing I wanted to say. I love how you, as the dad, there's so many of us moms on there, but I love that you're, talking about your life as a father. I mean, I'm divorced and remarried, and my husband stepped into my children's lives. I mean, he took on 4 kids, one being autistic. And, my son is extremely close to him, and he is a step parent as an autism father. Their father's really not in their life by his choice. And he, it's so great to see dads. I love it when I see dads. Adam too, Autism Care and Share from London. I mean, he shares his son. He's his primary caregiver. And I just think the more that we share from a father's perspective, a mother's perspective, a sibling's perspective, it's just great. That's why too, the other thing that I really love when you share about your other children, which is what I try to do. I talk about my other kids and mine too, is I don't want my other kids to feel like my whole focus is just Peyton. I want them to realize that, their ups and downs in life are just as important to me. Peyton may take up more of my time, but that doesn't mean he takes up more of my energy and love. And I think it's important that you show a well-balanced, and that's why I really, and I love your coffee. I love it when you show your coffee that you went and got your wife. I mean, say, I pay attention to your Twitter account. I mean, I love it. Yeah, I'll see these and and it smiles. I mean, I think it's great. I like when you show like there was one where you guys went out and I thought, this is great. This is the real world. This is what we're living through. And being an advocate like you are as an attorney, I think is even more special because I'm not sure we have enough strong advocate activists out there in the practice of law. I really don't. When I went through my divorce, my attorney had to keep asking me questions about the autism. And I loved my attorney. He was a long-term friend, but he wasn't really in tune with how different, why I stood on some of the principles I did of, I didn't want my child being shifted back and forth because we would have just had nothing but meltdowns.
Right, right. But recognizing that most people that live what we consider to be typical lives have their own issues, but would not have a reason to understand what it's like to raise a child with autism. So we do have some obligation to understand that and explain it to them. And I have found that to be true with elected officials. I can give you an example that there was a bill that was being introduced last session, well, session before the pandemic started. And the way the process works is the bill gets introduced by the sponsoring author who takes the seat in the middle of the hearing and then presents it. And then we'll have people come up and speak in favor. And then it will be the turn of those who do not support it to come up and sit next to them and speak against them. And this particular bill, we thought, would have an adverse effect on children with disabilities. And I went up and sat next to the bill sponsor and explained to him and to the rest of the committee why this was a poor idea and gave him some concrete examples. After I was done speaking, he leaned in and said, I have a nephew with autism. I would never want to do anything that would adversely impact him. I will reconsider my bill now. And invited me and my fellow advocates to come for another meeting on a subsequent date to talk about whether there's any improvement that could be made or whether he should just drop the bill. Ultimately, the bill was dropped.
That's fantastic.
And he would not have known that had he not heard from some others. And I'm sure in the interim, he probably made a phone call to his sibling to ask about his nephew and how this would adversely impact. That's where, if it's not for us, there's nobody else. We are the front line on these public policy decisions. So we need to show up and be counted, or nobody else will do it for us.
I completely agree. And you're exactly right. I mean, in Texas, we do a lot through the judges in our county. Like, during pandemics, it was the judges that decide, mask or no mask by county and things like that. And the judge that we have in our county, I've contacted him a couple times about things. And, even though he worked around autism, he wasn't directly involved with autism. So giving an autistic viewpoint from, being an autism family really does make a difference. And you're right. I mean, it's amazing to me, like if I go to an event or something, I say I'm a full-time autism activist and I'm a podcaster, blogger, blah, blah, blah. How many people will come up to me and say, I have a neighbor, or I have my best friend's son or daughter is autistic, or like you said, a nephew or a niece, or, and it's kind of, I'll bring up things with them and they'll say, oh, I didn't know that. And then they'll be like, wow, and you're right. I think we are the front line to make it heard, which is part of the reason why I bang that drum every day, is because, I know sometimes some of my friends are like, okay, Lynn, enough about autism. But I feel like if they hear it from me and I'm not there, the old adage of for every one person you touch, you're really touching 10 because they go back to their network. So if we can tell 10 people, really maybe 100 people will hear it and take it. That elected, as somebody who was in politics, I can tell you that elected official is now talking to his staff more, and that staff isn't going to probably stay with him forever. They go to other, places and talk about it. And that's fantastic. so good that you did that, because if it was going to adversely affect 100%, it should not have gone out there. And I love that. I love that story.
Now, we also have to acknowledge that we are a group that represents also many different unique experiences, and the autism spectrum is a good example when we're talking about children with disabilities. When you look at higher functioning children with autism versus lower functioning, they may not have the same interests, and we also have to acknowledge that when we're out advocating for public policy changes. And let me give you an example that I've run across. At the end of the day, when it's time to board onto a school bus, higher functioning parents, or higher functioning children may need to be included, and the process of giving them some normalcy would be they should be getting on the school bus with the rest of the children at the end of the day. On the other end, you can expect some low functioning children will not do well in a big crowd like that, and they need to be boarded onto a bus in a quieter setting without all the commotion of having hundreds of children running for different buses. So when we go out and advocate, we also have to be cognizant of what our other peers want for their own children, and advocate for the flexibility that addresses everybody's unique needs.
No, you're right. You're right. Because it's like, okay, it's not the same thing, but it's like when we fly in an airplane, Peyton doesn't really want, because he's high functioning, he doesn't really want to get on ahead of time. But at the same time, there are certain things like he has to sit right next to me because he gets very nervous on the flight. So, and he needs to be listening to something so that he's not, as stressed with the noises around him of the airplane revving up and all that kind of stuff. So, but if you say to him, would you like to board the airplane, when the babies and other things get on, he gets very upset because he feels like then we're telling him he's a baby because he's high functioning, but there's still things that he wants to have done, like I said, listen, and things. So yeah, you're right. I mean, the high and the low and everything in between, the old adage of if you've met one child with autism, you've met one child with autism. I mean, it's true. And you have to have that well-rounded, I mean, I have friends whose kids are mid-functioning, and things that Peyton can do or not do are not things they can do or not do. And so if I just go out there and say, well, Peyton can fully cook all meals, which he does, that doesn't mean that everybody can. And so if I'm going to advocate for something, I need to advocate for the wide range and get the full viewpoint. And you're right. I mean, I think that's a great point.
One of the things that we learned from being a parent of a child with special needs is that willingness to be tolerant and flexible, to understand that every child's unique, whether they're typical or they have autism or other disabilities. When people ask us that question, what have you learned from being a parent of a special needs child? That's one of the things I can say is you're a lot more tolerant than you would be if you're a typical children, because sometimes your child just can't do the things that you're expecting them to do. I cannot expect my son to wear his clothes all the time. It seems to be an impossible task. We've hired therapists and dozens by dozens to come in and try to figure out how to get him to wear clothes. He just won't do it. So we used to say it was poor parenting, and now we have to, I think other people have to acknowledge that's who he is.
Right.
And when we see other parents, we're reluctant to ever judge. There are some parents that have gotten to the point that their child is placed in a group home younger than we have lasted so far, but we don't judge them for that. Right. You got, that's every parent's got to make their own call on what they think is the best thing to do. We have a group that we get together with, pre-pandemic and hopefully soon. They're also parents of children with special needs, and we call ourselves #perfect, because we decided the criticism we get from other parents is unfounded and misdirected. They do not know what they're talking about when it comes to raising our children. That we think we're perfect at what we're doing, and we're not taking criticism from somebody that doesn't really know. If
I
somebody
love
thinks
that.
that my child needs to be disciplined in order to get him to wear clothes, I would say, you know what? I think I've got this. I think I know better than you two what I'm doing. I'm not going to argue about it. I'm just going to walk away confidently with a smirk about, oh, really? You think you can tell me how to handle this?
I love that. I love that. I was in a little quick story. I was in Casco one day, and there was a young boy. He was probably about 6 or 7, and he was having a meltdown. And his parents were trying to deal with it. And I was standing there, and I was kind of, I was looking at the parents with sympathy, and I thought, if they need, because they had another child, and I thought if they need my help, I was going to walk over there. And I heard parents around me who obviously don't understand autism, don't have an autistic child, giving strong advice as to what needed to be done. And so I turned around and said, hey, I'm a full-time autism activist. And since, this little boy, because I heard the mother say, he's autistic, because somebody was saying, is he okay? Is he okay? And I said, you obviously have the solutions for us autism parents. And so I was wondering if I could interview you so that I could share your wealth of knowledge with everybody of how to, for all of us to deal with these things. Well, needless to say, they just, and stomped off. And I thought, maybe next time they'll think twice before they tell me how to raise or tell them how to raise an autistic child, because you're right. I mean, I say all the time, the greatest gift Peyton ever gave me was patience, because I suddenly learned that things that I thought the way the world should go, or things that used to be important to me before I had Peyton, suddenly don't matter at all. Because living with Peyton has taught me the greatest lesson of patience and understanding and being tolerant of that, because, I love him so unconditionally. And he really is he was an amazing change even for my older 3 kids, his siblings, because they suddenly realized how much more protective of those who were being bullied or were different or were doing things differently they needed to be. And I think it kind of, there's so many positives to it. And I think too often we talk about the negatives, but I think the positives are great. And I think we should talk about the positives. Yeah, there's plenty of negatives to it. It's difficult. But at the same time, we've learned a lot.
Yeah, we learned some other virtues that come to us through different experiences. You called it patience. I call it being non-judgmental or being tolerant of others, being more understanding. You don't know what other people have got going on in their lives. And I'm not just talking about me, but I'm talking about anybody else that's short in the grocery store line. You don't know if they've got, a spouse at home with cancer, that they've been up all night with somebody. You don't know what they've been going through. So cut each other some slack and don't be so quick to judge and think that you know how to make their life better if they would only do as you tell them to do. Instead, give them the respect that they probably have been doing the best they can with whatever life has dealt them recently.
Oh, I agree.
And for us, we're just another story. Everybody has a story. Nobody gets through this life unscathed. Something tragic is going to happen to everybody sooner or later, and more than likely it's sooner. So it's one of those virtues that we have learned from a lot of sleepless nights and being sleep deprived.
Yeah, I get that. So let me ask you, how did you guys make it through the haircuts? Do you still have issues with haircuts, or?
We do, yeah. So Ethan has a lot of challenging behaviors, obviously. It's not just clothing, but it's self-injury, it's other sensory issues that he has. And the clippers that are used for haircuts, you think that they are cutting a nerve the way he reacts. So we call it the haircut workout, because I have to go and use wrestling moves to hold him so that the woman that cuts his hair can get to him quickly. She happens to also be an autism mom, not happens, that's how I know her. And that she's also a wife of a Marine. And we like to say she's tough as a wife of a Marine and an autism mom. And over the years, we have a routine that we we have developed hand signals just a look that we can give, because autism doesn't like talking. So when we're in there, I will let her know before I bring my son into the salon what kind of mood we're in and how we want to do the haircut. And then we take the booth at the end of the salon away from the rest of the crowd. And it doesn't take more than 30 to 60 seconds before he's lost his shirt. We do, by the way, keep his shorts on the entire time. For the most part, we've dropped him a few times, but for the most part, he stays clothed. And it's my job to do a basket hold or a bear hug, or to have him on the ground where we do the wrap where his hands are underneath his armpits and I pull him tight so he cannot get away. Obviously, the hair is flying everywhere, and that's just the way it works. And if you've seen the movie Pulp Fiction, the last scene where John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson are walking out with a pair of shorts and t-shirts, that's what we look like. Just don't make eye contact on the way out of the salon, and just act like you're cool and like you meant it for everything to happen the way it just did. And then just try not to make any more of a scene than what just happened. But as soon as you leave the door, everybody's talking about what in the world just happened down at the other end of the salon, where these two grown men were wrestling around on the floor and the stylist is diving in and hair is flying all over the place.
Oh,
But yeah, so it's a haircut workout. We leave there sweating, and it's a good event if nobody draws blood. If we leave there with no scratch or teeth marks.
Oh yeah. When Peyton was young, he's gotten better now, but when he was young, I dreaded. In fact, we went through a phase. I was looking at pictures the other day. We went through a phase where Peyton's hair was here because it was just so traumatic for him. And I thought, I'm just going to let it go. And then finally one day I took him when I have two boys and a girl, and my other two boys were getting their hair cut, and he told me he wanted to get a haircut. And that was, it took, thank goodness, the woman that cut his hair was very understanding. And it took a while because it was stop, go, stop, go, stop, go, stop, go, because no more, and then, part of the hair's cut, and then, okay, you can cut, okay, he just would, okay, and then stop. And then, and we finally got a whole haircut. And, it was 2 times of going. We finally got a whole haircut. But my attitude was, if he's going to work into it, we'll work into it. If he doesn't, he doesn't. But you're right. I mean, you have to do how it works for them, because and that's something that a lot of people don't understand. I mean, just like potty training, it's just not easy with them. There's so many little things that. One thing that all autism parents pretty much have in common is these little milestones that with other kids, maybe you walk through easily, take extra effort on this. And, when Peyton was young, he was obsessed, and I mean obsessed with the Weather Channel. So he would watch the Weather Channel like all day long, and he would just, if he saw that there was like a thunderstorm, it could be 3 states over, but he was sure it was coming to us. And, that was just his whole entire thing was the Weather Channel. So, they all have their little niches. And how did you find, let me ask you this. Did you find having your other children, did you find that you had to work them into him or him into them, or a little bit of both?
Well, our story is a little bit more unique because, we have 2 children with severe disabilities. So we started out with a daughter who was diagnosed with Williams syndrome, which is, if people look it up, if they run into a Williams child, they will know what I'm talking about. They're very gregarious. They are smaller in stature. They're notable by the starburst pattern in their eyes, and they're musically inclined, but their IQ is low, like Down syndrome. So we were already desensitized or sensitized, depending on how you look at it, to know what the milestones were and how we were missing them. And when we had a typical child where everything came so easy for us, it was night and day for parenting. And when we came to our third child, who was running into developmental delays, we knew something was up. And that certainly had us prepared. We understood how the school system worked. We knew all about IEPs. We knew FAPE and all the other acronyms that come with going through special education, and who all the right people were to know. And we were prepared for that. But getting the other two to be involved in autism didn't ever happen. To this day, it's never happened. Our youngest is in his own world. It pervades everybody else's world, and they have to live in his world. And we don't get to say to him, you have to wait your turn. He doesn't do that. It's his world. It's his sensory issues. He needs to have it happen his way, or there won't be a way. And we modified the house to accommodate him. So there are going to be rooms that we lock, so he's not able to go in and out of. And for his siblings, they're used to that type of lifestyle. Let me give you one anecdote. When our typical son was in middle school age, so in the 6th to 8th grade range, like any other kid, he was really into playing video games on TV. We have a 4-season porch that has a door that will slide and close. So he could go out there with his neighborhood friends that would come over. And for whatever reason, kids like watching each other playing video games. And they would all be in there watching one of them playing the video game, whether it was a car race or something. But our youngest child with autism comes walking in and walks through the room. Now, the new kid in the neighborhood thought he had seen a ghost. The other kids kept watching and cheering for whatever was going on TV, while the other kid dropped his jaw and kept looking around like, did nobody else notice this kid walk through who's buck naked? Everybody else in the neighborhood was already accustomed to it and knew what was going on. So they fit into his world rather than us fitting into his world. And people have gotten used to it in our neighborhood, and that's the way we live. Like I said, if you come to our house, you're going to be in for a surprise.
Yeah, no, I understand. When Peyton was young, he went through a phase for a while where he wanted to light fires all the time. Like, he was obsessed with lighting fires. And so my older 3 kids and I, because I was a single parent at the time, my older 3 kids and I had to literally take our entire house and make it fireproof. Like, we had a gas range and stuff. And so we had, things over the top of it with heavy pots on it so that he couldn't get that off, and he couldn't get the pots off. And my older kids' friends would come over and they'd be like, why is all this, stacked on everything? And why is this way here and there and everything? And he can't go into this room because it had the hot water heaters, and I was afraid he'd find the flame, and everything. And I know what you're saying. I mean, my older kids just got to a point where, like, he went through a phase 2 where he would not sleep. He just would not sleep. He would sleep for 20 minutes at a time. He'd lay down for 20 minutes at a time. And at night, all he wanted was every light on in the house. And we, at the time, lived in a 3-floor house. And he would just go up and down the stairs. Well, I was scared to death he was going to fall. But it was the only thing that kept him from not stressing, was going up and down those stairs. So we took shifts, me and my older 3 kids, because they're considerably older than him. And we would just make sure he wasn't going to fall. And we'd let him turn every light on in the house, and up and down those stairs he'd go, up and down, lay down for 20 minutes, get up and down the stairs he'd go. And, I had a neighbor say to me once, because he was a firefighter, and I get up in the middle of the night and all those lights are on in your house. Is everything okay? And I said, I have a child with autism. He goes, say no more. He goes, bless you, Mom. Because he realized, it was more a matter of, I was at the point where I was like, what? If somebody's offended because my lights are on all night, oh, well, but I mean, he would just, that's all he wanted to do, walk up and down the stairs. I don't know why, but that was what was comforting to him, was just going up and down the stairs for hours at end.
Nice thing is that your neighbor was nice enough to be looking out for you, and then also understood as well. So it's, you have neighborhood understanding.
Yes.
That's what I was talking about. Be non-judgmental and be tolerant. And you sound like you got a good neighbor that does that.
Yeah, exactly. Because, you know, one of our other neighbors the other day, I saw her in the grocery store, and her and her husband actually adopted a little boy that's autistic and was born with fetal alcohol syndrome. And he was put into foster care. And of course, nobody really wanted him. They took him, they adopted him, they've given him a very loving home. And he had a meltdown in the front yard, and one of the other neighbors called the cops. And so they came, you know, because they were told that he was scared of his parents instead of understanding what a meltdown was. And she just, you know, bless her heart, she just was really going through a really tough time. And I said to her, look, I'm right up the street. She lives like down the street and up the next street. I said, I'm right down the street. If you need me, I'm here. If you need me with that other neighbor, there's other neighbors in here who have autistic kids. We're here. You know, we're here for you. You know, please know that, because we have one boy in our neighborhood who's Peyton's age, who is low functioning, and he constantly bangs his head against the wall. So his parents had to put mattresses on every single wall, you know, so that he bangs into the mattress, not the wall. And, you know, I think too, and that neighbor apparently didn't want to take the opportunity to learn about his meltdowns. And that's why I said to her, well, we're here. You know, if we form together, it makes it easier. I mean, when that guy did that, that touched every part of my heart when he said, you know, bless you, mom. You know, I mean, because he smiled. It was cute. He, you know, is everything okay over there? Yeah, you know, my son's autistic. Oh, bless you, mom. Bless you. You know, I mean, it was like he had an immediate understanding of what we were going through. But, you know, at the same time, I wasn't going to sit there. I'm sorry, but, you know, the normal says you have to go to bed, and you lay on your bed, and, you know, I mean, we just, my kids would be like, I don't want that shift tonight, you know. I'd be like, well, it's kind of what we got
All right,
to
good.
do.
That's certainly a great takeaway from this podcast is how your neighbor reacted. So those people that are raising a child with autism, or they know somebody that's raising a child with autism, it's just those simple gestures that make the difference, because nobody's going to give us a cure. We're not getting a cure, but
Right.
if we get some understanding and we remove that anxiety, having to worry about what other people are thinking about us, that's helpful in and of itself.
I agree.
And I appreciate going through the drive-through with the buck naked guy in the back seat and never having to worry about what the people handing me that cup of coffee for my wife are going to say to me. They all understand, they're cool with it, and they don't make a big deal out of it, and I don't want a big deal out of it either. So
It's just your pic. I just no. My favorite, though, I have to tell you, my favorite the other day was when she wanted you to get what, vanilla paste, and you said, I think I'll just get vanilla ice cream, and that might be close enough.
It did not work. For those listening, bringing home vanilla ice cream is not the same as vanilla paste.
I love that. I laughed so hard. It was just.
But I tell you, the other thing is, you don't want to be sitting in that spice aisle looking for vanilla paste. I couldn't find it anywhere. I asked for help, and nobody knew. So vanilla ice cream will not go to waste. It will work just as well.
That was great. Yeah, no, like I said, I love your Twitter, and that's why I was so happy when you said, Jess, you'd be happy to come on as a podcast guest, because I'm not just saying this. I admire you. I truly admire you. I love your tweets. I love how down to earth you are. You tell the real story, but at the same time, you aren't doing it for attention. You're doing it because it's a real life situation, and it's gaining acceptance and awareness. You know, I keep telling people all the time, I love that people spread awareness, but my goodness, I really want to start focusing on the acceptance and activism, because the more people that accept it, like you said, when you're driving through with the naked guy in the back while you're getting coffee, there's acceptance. Those guys are awesome. Okay. They're awesome. You know, that's why, like, my son has an Etsy shop, and he hand makes everything in it, and he sells it in Etsy, and he has his own little company called Team Awesomism. And it's so awesome because he takes the proceeds from his sales and helps other autistic adults. because there's so many of them that need things. And I don't know if you saw the story that I've been dealing with for a couple of years, but there's a young man who I follow on Twitter, and I ended up getting close to the family, and his family was homeless. He's 44 years old. He's autistic. He's blind in one eye, deaf in one ear. And his mother died suddenly, and they didn't have a place to live. And I put together a fundraiser with friends and put my network together. And I'm proud to say that this week they are getting their brand new extra long mobile home that is theirs. And he and his brother will be living in it. So he's now in a safe and secure environment instead of going into a home and really missing his mom, because his mom was his world, because she took him everywhere, being blind and deaf and autistic. And I think the power of acceptance is so needed. And that's why, again, your tweets are just great, because you do them with humor, you do them with love, you do them with respect, but you do them with reality. And I think what you do helps gain acceptance from other people in such a great way. And I thank you so much for those tweets and for being, willing to be a podcast guest and share your story. And I will tell you now, every time I see that cup of coffee, I'm not going to be saying, "Oh," I'm going to be laughing. I want you to know.
You know what's in the back seat. That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. My wife, you can use this quote. My wife says, "If you've seen one, you've seen one too many." So she shares that with all the neighbor wives. They all have the same reaction. Well, now let me tell you that your work as well is so important. So it's you have reached a broad audience of people, and each one of us are doing our efforts to help support each other, and then help educate those other that are not part of the autism community, what they can do to be tolerant and supporting, as we try to do the same for them as well. Most of us that have a child with autism also have typical children, so we understand what it's like to have typical children, so we can relate to their world. It's a little bit more difficult for them to relate to ours, but people like you that come along and help others learn, and then do the advocacy or the grassroots work, make all the difference. If you're not there, there's nobody else that will do it. So we appreciate everything that you're doing as well.
Thank you so much. I feel so many times like I get up in the morning and I feel like, oh, I'm overwhelmed. I'll wake up to DMs or emails from parents, "Please help me." And it breaks my heart. And I can't help everybody. I try, many times I'll refer them to other people. But I feel like I would rather wake up, and I mean this, I would rather wake up in the morning and feel overwhelmed from helping the autism community than sleep well at night not helping anybody. So, sometimes it's a thankless job, but it isn't, because, the love, I mean, I have to say this, I know I'm going to cry, but that mom called me because she ended up in ICU, and she called to say goodbye, and she said, "I want you to know that I'm okay with passing because I know you're there for Lloyd." And that hit me so hard. And one of her friends sent me a text message after she passed and said, "Lloyd's gonna be okay because of guardian angels like you." And I thought, she knew I was gonna fight to get him that home so that he would be okay. And he has my number. He calls me all the time. And I tell him, "I'm always here for you. I'm not your mom, but I will be here for you and I will take care of you." And I do. I try. I'm not the greatest at it. I make mistakes. I've done lots of mistakes in my life, but I try really hard to do what I can for others.
The only thing that really counts is that you're showing up and you made the effort. Actually getting it done doesn't matter as much as making the effort.
Yeah.
Always getting to that start line. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I try. And that's why I love it too when I have other parents like you and some of the other parents on Twitter and other social media, where we can bond together and enjoy each other's experiences and relate to things, because I don't know, somehow when I read some of your posts and I read some of the other autism families, especially autistic adults posts, and I smile at night, I think, I get it. I get it. And it just makes my life a little easier. So, but I really appreciate you being on here, and thank you for all the work you do. And especially as a legal advocate, I really, really am going and dealing with elected officials, because I always tell people this. Being a grassroots person in politics for 25 years, I dealt with so much, watching these politicians put their foot in their mouth on a daily basis and somehow have to try to figure out how to help, fix that. This is a cakewalk compared to dealing with them, because so many of them are like, oh, so, I get it. I get it. Trust me. So people like you, and I will tell you this from somebody who worked on the other side, who worked for elected officials. I loved people like you that came sometimes, because we would like try to get the elected officials to listen to us when we worked for them, and they'd be like, yeah, 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 yeah. And then advocates like you would come in and they'd, oh, we should be doing this. And we were like, mm-hmm. So I loved advocates like you, because we'd be like, oh, now they're listening. Good.
That's right. Good.
Yep.
We need some of that.
Yep.
But thank you for having me on.
Thank you. And you have an awesome day. Give your wife an extra special hug for me, because I know she's got her hands full.
I will.
Take care.
Okay. See you.
All right. Bye-bye.